Okay, so we're going to continue on Daf Nun Hey Omid Beis at the Mishnah. Last week we went through last couple of weeks, but last week we went through the previous Mishnah, which really focused on the machlokes between the Mishnah and Levi on the categories of different items that require at least a pruta, a minimum of a pruta, to be choshev in order to follow through and find someone liable. In other words, less than a pruta, we say in most cases, less than a pruta, it's not choshev enough to rise to the level of being an offense, or whether it's marrying a woman or gezel or Shabbos Haveda. Now in Nun Hey Amid Beis, we're going to touch on something interesting. We've been talking about this all along, and that is what triggers a chomesh. And as we know that a chomesh has to be given on certain circumstances, and the Mishnah is going to sort of capsulize for us when a chomesh is appropriate, and it'll be very interesting to see how we treat that, because we know we treat it in our circumstance. We've always talked about a chomesh by ono, but there's a wider circle of when chomesh is appropriate. So the Mishnah starts by saying chamisha chomshin hein. There are 5 categories of a chomesh, 5 different categories when a chomesh becomes appropriate. Elohein, these are they. Now, the first category includes multiple. So what we're going to read now is really all part of one category. What is that category? Ha'ochel truma. If someone, this is by accident. Ha'ochel truma, someone eats truma. The trumas maser, and trumas maser, which is what the Levi has to give to the Kohen. The trumas maser shall demai. Then there's a separate category for trumas maser of demai being suffix, whether in other words it's suffix. Now notice it's trumas maser shall demai and not truma shall demai. We'll see in a minute, but truma, we're saying that even an Am Haaretz will not fail to give truma, but trumas maser might fall between the cracks. So it's a very interesting distinction. V'chala, and giving challah, which is to the kohen, ubikurim to the kohen, ma'aseh chomesh. So all of these 5 are considered one category because they were all in the category of items that are holy and are given to the kohen. And in each one of them, if someone inadvertently eats it, then he's chayev a chomesh. So look at Rashi, ha'ochel truma b'shogeg truma gedola. We're speaking about truma gedola, which you give directly to the kohen. The trumas maser is maser min ha'maser. That's the Levi's responsibility to give from his chelik also to the kohen. Because remember, in all, it is a fact that the Levi is getting more than the kohen. The Levi gets maser, which is 1/10. The kohen gets 1/40th, 50th, 60th. It's a much smaller amount. So in order to make up the deficit, then we see that there are other categories that go directly to the kohen. So the first one was trumas maser. Trumas maser shall demai, of a suffix, meaning shehalokeach me'am haaretz tzarich lahafresh misafik. Aval truma gedola shall demai leka. But truma gedola of demai is not included. The l'chayva chachamim lahafresh, because the Torah does not require you to be mafresh truma. Kedarin b'saitin lebisha shalach mechol gvul eretz Yisrael v'rosh lahayu mafrishin ela truma gedola b'lvad. Even amei haaretz were giving truma gedola. In other words, they searched the land and they saw, you know what, the kohen will always get his cut. So even a Am Haaretz will give to the kohen, but after that it's up in the air. Alma Zahir and Hayubah, that since they were careful to give to the kohen, so truma gedola is not included in this group. So most of chomesh is Rashi to call Hana Ikra Truma, but Trumas, because all of them are called Truma. But Trumas Maser Kusiv Hari Mosem Mimenu Trumas Hashem. B'chala Ksiv Chala Torimud Truma. So you notice the term Truma is used. The Bikurim Ksiv the Trumas Yotcha. It's for Trumas Yotcha. So all of these have the word Truma. and we make a hekesh that every one of them is included in this parsha of Truma that you have to give misafik. Well, Omar Mar, but Mar says, "Ila bekurim, by bekurim, v'chol hanu chad ninu, the mishem echad hein boy," because they all come from one source, one name, meaning Truma. So even though they can't go by different names, now we saw in this week's parsha we had the whole mitzvah of bikurim. So we see that the Torah tells us that you have a chiyuv to give to the kohen, and therefore all of these categories are considered one.
Rabbi, why is the Chumash added to Bikurim? You're giving the fruits to the Bikurim, so there's no redemption. So why is there a Chumash there?
So if someone eats Bikurim before giving the chelik to the kohen, we're talking about.
Oh, before. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. In other words, this is inadvertent use of something that should go to the kohen. So since the kohen gets first dibs and you haven't given him, then we say that you're chayiv to give him and to add a chaimish. And it's consistent. And it's consistent for everything that we've seen from what we know of chaimish. Is if someone redeems his own items, he has to give a chaimish. If he redeems through somebody else, you don't give a chaimish. So
but in those cases, they're deliberately redeeming it for their convenience.
Right, and this is all inadvertent. Yes.
Inadvertent. Thank you.
Yeah.
So one thing I've always kind of wondered about Demai, because I've heard before this thing, that Demai has doesn't have a chashash of truma, but does have a chashash about everything else.
Right.
And I wonder if the idea maybe the hypothesis, all the maestros, which is the stuff afterwards generally, okay, because Bikurim and Chal and stuff are all entirely different categories, but in terms of your field, it's truma and then it's two different maestros. And I wonder if the truma was sort of always everybody did it because you would do it first. You didn't have, we talked about maybe a minimum of a 60th, but basically it was a very small amount and it didn't have to be precise. So you could just say, okay, here's a basket. I'm going to leave this stuff, the hand off to the Kohen. But then the Meiser, if you weren't diligent about it, you'd have to first have to figure out exactly how much you have, so you could do exactly 10% for this Meiser and exactly 10% for that Meiser, and that would be therefore more likely to fall through the cracks.
Right, but you see with challah also you're imprecise. I mean, in other words, the precision.
But I'm talking about in terms of the chomesh, the challah is in the same category. I'm talking about in terms of this idea of demai. Of a idea that somebody who's not so from not being careful about certain things but not about others.
Right. It's interesting because Rashi even says they canvassed the land. In other words, they went around and saw that everybody gave truma. Truma was not the issue. It was after truma, like you say, that's when it starts. Whether it's because of the precision of what you have to give, but everybody knew the kohen has to get truma. After that, it started becoming a little lax. Who do you give? What do you give? And therefore, even though he may have given, it's not to say the Amorch didn't give, but there's a safek in some cases. So in some cases, like misafek, all right. So in those cases,
Rabbi, weren't there also timelines that you have to give truma by a certain amount of time? And there was some.
Well, I mean, you give it with the harvest. I mean, what you're saying, you mean that you have to give it within a certain time of after you harvest and after you do everything.
I mean, there were due dates based on.
I think it's usually 30 days. I think it's usually 30 days.
And then what about the extra fifth? Did they institute timelines for that as well?
Well, remember that we said that yes, there are timelines, but remember we said anything. And I don't know if that applies here by the Kohen, but anything having to do with Kodesh, when we were about the Beis HaMikdash, we weren't worried because the Gizbar of the Beis HaMikdash, the treasury, the treasurers made sure that they got their cut. Now, I don't know that it applies to a Kohen, so that the Kohen has a posse that goes around and makes sure that people give the Chaimish. Typically, what we know is that it's 30 days. That it's within 30 days of when it's due is when it should be given, and the chayra that would include the chaimish too. If so, but remember that here it's not a shortage of supply because you're talking about a harvest. So if someone in a harvest gave the truma, the chaimish was easily given because it's right there. And now think about it. What's a chaimish of truma? It's almost nothing. I mean, if someone's giving a 60th, you have to give a chaimish. How much is a chaimish? Then you have to worry, is it with Shavapruta? Now we got to go back to the other Mishnah and we got to say, is the chaimish of Truma enough, Shavapruta?
In order not to have the owner, the farmer, not delay even on the Chumash, I'm assuming there were deadlines that you can't keep postponing the Chumash because
no, you can't. But remember, we're only talking about someone who inadvertently ate it. How often will that happen that someone will inadvertently use it before giving it to the client?
Yeah.
I don't know statistics, but I think the chances are very, very little, because if everybody knew, even the Amoritz, let's say he was harvesting, he knew to give to the truma. I mean, it was almost like knee jerk. The first thing you do is you give the kohen. So
Yeah.
how many times will it happen that a person will not give the kohen and use it and therefore have to give a chaimish? Probably very little, I'm guessing. Probably very little where that circumstance came up. But the Mishnah is teaching at the halacha because the Torah it says that you have to give truma, and it happens maybe once in a blue moon or a red moon, whatever, that someone will be chayiv to give chaimish. So clearly it happens, but again, I don't think this is a davar ragil that we're always worrying about a chomesh in these categories. Nevertheless, these are the 5 categories that the Mishnah talks about, and tells us that you're chayiv to give moshe chomesh. Now, v'hapoda neta revoi. And this is interesting. If someone is, because this is not necessarily, this is not given to the client, so there's a separate inyan here. Net revoyu masa sheni shalo mosif chomesh. So net revoy and masa sheni shalo, which we know that only if he redeems his own. Once you redeem your own, then you have to be mosif chomesh. Says Rashi net revoy. Most of Chomesh, Pidjano, the Pidyon Netravoy, Kodesh, because the redemption of the Netravoy is Kodesh, Kodesh Gomer, Mimasa. It doesn't say it by Netravoy, that it doesn't say that you have to do that. But we learn a Gezerah Shava between Netravoy and Masa Sheni, because by Masa Sheni it says that you have to give the Chomesh. And because the word kodesh, the Gezerah Shava is therefore anything that has the word kodesh is similar to Master Sheni, and Neter Ravoy has the word kodesh, even though it doesn't specifically indicate that you have to give the chaimish. So therefore, we learn from Master Sheni. We learn from Kedushin Gabe Neter Ravoy Ksiv Kodesh Hilulim. Because Master Sheni, Master Kosav Kol Master Oretz Mizara Oretz will be kodesh. V'hanitrei Nami. Chad choshev lehu the mechad kron nifrach. You learn it out from one pasuk, which is the chomesh b'net ravoy loiksiv elam masa yolav. So it's a little bit different by net ravoy than all the others, but here we learn it from Gezerah Shava that net ravoy and masa sheni both require a chomesh. So that's the second category. The third category is Podesh as Hekdosho, which we've known because we've already learned that before we talked about that if someone is paid a Hegdish, something that was dedicated to the Beis HaMikdash, and he wants to be poded, Mosif Chomesh, he adds a Chomesh, and of course you take that, you bring it up to Yerushalayim, V'hagoizlas Chavero, someone who Shava Pruta, of course, we let the Mishnah last week. Goes Chavero, he swears falsely, and then he says, "I really did it." He recants. He has to give a Pruta. V'nish below Mosif Chomesh. So in other words, Goes Chavero Shava Pruta v'nish below Mosif Chomesh. He has to give a Chomesh. So these are the categories where you have to give a Chomesh, and in each case, the theory is that even if though it was, well, not only inadvertent, in the case of Kodesh, in some cases it was an outright denial, and then he swears. So because of the Shavua, in the case of Gezel, you have to bechayev. Okay, so these are the 5 categories, and now we're going to dig into it a little bit further. Okay, to just finish the Rashi Hekdosha V'lo Shel Acher Makdish Ksiv, which we know that if you're Magdish, if you redeem someone else's Hegdish, you don't give a Chomish, only your own. It's not in the form of a kanas. It's not really a penalty. It's almost like, I would say, maybe a utility fee or something, something along those lines, not as a penalty that you're really mechayev to bring, let's say, whatever you have in case of Master Sheni or something else. You have to, in the case of Podes Hektish, you really should bring that to Yerushalayim. So the fact that you're not is saying that it's not less choshuv, because that money is translated into something that you're going to do in Yerushalayim. So it's not less choshuv. The theory, which we're going to see in the Gemara later, is that in some cases you're easing your burden, because instead of schlepping a barrel full of food to Yerushalayim, which may spoil or makes it inconvenient, so yeah, a convenience fee, that's the word I'm looking for. So it's a convenience fee because usually you should bring the etzem, the product to Yerushalayim, but we're giving you a pass, and we're saying you don't have to drag it up to Yerushalayim because it's not going to be easy for you and it may spoil. So as a convenience fee, it's like a credit card. I mean, the credit card is there to make life easy, so you shouldn't have to, pay cash or whatever it is that you're doing. So the convenience fee is a chaimish. That's really what Chazal is telling us, that because you're doing it for your own benefit, then you have to give a little bit extra to get that benefit. Not so if you're doing for someone else's benefit. Okay, so that's, I think, the way you have to look at it, that it's a convenience fee. So in Hektish V'lo Shel Acher Makdish, Anahena B'Shogeg, if someone is Nahena B'Shogeg, the Chayiv Korban Me'ila B'Chomish, right? So in the case of Kachim, it's there's also a korban involved, but it's an accidental use of Hegdish. Then the theory always was, like, I won't compare it to the Oreh Miklat, but I'll say that someone who accidentally ate Hegdish, then there's something in Shemayim that you have to repair, just like accidentally killing somebody. You have to run to Oreh Miklat. It's not that you're guilty; it's you're guilty in the eyes of the family. But the Rebbeinu Shalom says that I know you're not guilty, but still, so you have to run to the Oreh Miklat. So the same thing here. You did it inadvertently, but you did it, and since it belongs to the Rebbeinu Shalom, you have to give something extra so that you. Because doing it inadvertently, we all know that inadvertently doesn't mean inadvertently. I mean, if you did it, then there's something behind it why you did it. Of course, you can say I'm totally blameless because what do I know? But if you do it, there's a reason why you did it inadvertently. Anyway, these are complicated things. So we say the Chaimish takes care of all these issues. So now we'll look at the Gemara. Omar Rava. Rava asked a question on this issue of Demai. Koshele Rabbi Lazar. It was difficult to Rabbi Lazar, Trumas Maser Shel Demai. This whole union of Trumas Maser of Demai, he also Chachamen Chizuk L'Divreichem Mishal Torah. In other words, normally, I mean, the Torah prohibition is the one that's more serious than the rabbinic prohibition. So the Torah is telling us that in the case of Demai, in Torah, Truma Gedola, there's no chashash, right? We don't worry. So if we also chachamim, because Trumas Maser, are they going to make Trumas Maser more difficult or more serious than Truma itself? this goes to the underlying question, which we had a little discussion before, of whether someone, and Menashe, to your point, Truma, everybody gives. Okay, maybe because it's the first thing, you don't even, it's almost automatic. But are we going to say that Trumas Maser, which the Levi is mechuyev to give, he takes Maser, and from his Maser he gives Truma. Are we going to say that is less than Truma? In other words, why is the my label laid on Trumas Maser when the Torah itself does not find it problematic? That's really the question: is why the Chachamim are more stringent than the underlying reason, which would have been Truma itself. So
is there any notion, Rabbi, that the regular Truma is more publicly known? Everybody's doing it, and people may be helping each other, whatever. But Truma, but the next level down is more hidden in terms of the public awareness that he's doing it.
But that's the point. In other words, you're saying that it's more widespread, so everybody would know it. And again, it's the first thing you give, and you give it right off the bat.
Because you can discuss which Kohen you gave it to. It becomes a social discussion almost, because everybody can choose whichever Kohen he wants to give it to.
Yeah, the
Right.
flip side, though, is that when it comes to Trumas Meiser, as opposed to regular Meiser, I agree that distinction applies. Trumas Meiser arguably should be, if anything, even more followed than regular Truma, because it's going from the stuff that the Levi is almost as much as a Kohen, involved his whole life with dealing with these things. If he's getting matanas, he should know he's got to give the matanas.
Right. So it's really incumbent on the Levi. So if you were saying that it was incumbent on the Amma Oretz, that the Amma Oretz has to give, okay, then you can Chashash, is he giving or is he not giving? But you're right. Here it's derivative. He gave the Maser. Now so it's on the shoulders of the Levi. Are we going to then say that he will?
I mean, the Levium were living by and large, the Levium were living in the cities, and while obviously they had many different professions, they were supposed to be much more involved in teaching the people and all these other things. There shouldn't have been, maybe there were, but there shouldn't have really been, so to speak, Levium Amaretz.
Yeah. So anyway, so he's bothered by the fact that you would treat Trumas Maser less than you treat Truma, because there's no Isser. So why? The question is, why are the Rabbanan making it a more serious offense that you have to give that they're not trusting here?
They're elevating it to more serious.
More serious, yeah, because the Torah is worried about it. Why are the Chachamim worried about it? So that's really sort of the notion of the question. Amar Rav Nachman and Shmuel. You know why? Hi Mani, because why is this the case? Is because Rav Meir he. Because so they're following the opinion of Rav Meir. We're going to see in a minute what that means. Why Rav Meir? Because Rav Meir is the one who's the source of what this is. The Omar also Chachamim Chizuk with Rechem Shel Torah. So in other words, so the Chachamim were the ones who were who strengthened and who said that that they are as stringent as the Torah. So they were the ones who imposed the Chomesh for Demai. In other words, what they're saying is that just like the Torah required a Chomesh on Trumas Maser, which is a Torah responsibility, but till now we were looking at it and comparing it to Truma. And with Truma, we said, no, everybody knows Truma, and therefore there's no Choimish, the rabbis didn't impose a Truma on a demise situation. Comes along the Chachamim and say, no, the comparison isn't to Truma, it's to Trumas Meiser. And Trumas Meiser, we say that by Demai, you do give a Choimish. So he's saying that it's different than the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah is talking about with Meir, who says that you have to look at it differently. The Chachamim are the ones who say that that the Rabbanan make a stringency where the Torah makes a stringency. Comes Reb Meir, and Reb Meir says, no, I'm going to make a stringency even when the Torah doesn't require it. So that's the chiluk here. Is by Trumas Maser there is a stringency to Minatorah. So therefore we're going to say Midrabanan also there is a stringency that if there's Demai, we're not going to be less than what the Torah says. The Torah says you have to give a Chomish, we'll also give a Chomish. So that's kind of the comparison here to answer Rabbi Loz's question of why you give it on Trumas Maser. He's saying no, the Trumas Maser is like the Trumas Maser of the Torah, which does have a penalty. The Torah has a penalty for Trumas Maser. Therefore, the Rabbanan will also make that same penalty. All right, so that sort of answers.
What were they afraid of?
Again, I think the underlying concern was that once that, like we said before, that once you get beyond Truma Gedola, all bets are off. That the Amoritz is going to give the proper Truma, right? Halacha Truma, Trumas Maser. So
there's no Amoritz involved in Trumas Maser. They're just worried maybe at a certain time of the history, the Levium were not that sharp either.
Yeah, I mean, that's right, because again, that doesn't flow to the Amoritz. You're right. It flows directly to the Levi. So I guess Minatorah also, there was a concern that maybe with the Levium there would be an oversight because they get Maser, and maybe they'll say, okay, this is my Maser, it belongs to me, and for some reason they'll forget. I mean, obviously, if Rashi tells us that they canvassed all over and found that there was never a situation where Truma was not properly given. Rashi doesn't say this, but maybe there were some hiccups with regard to Trumas Maser, and therefore to be stringent, because it really is it's an Avera. I mean, the Torah says you have to give it, so maybe there'll be an oversight. Again, hard to understand because we're talking about the Levium. The Levium are, they're certainly trustworthy. So,
the population, were there many more Levium than Kohanim anyway?
I think there were. I think there were.
Many more. Sure.
Numbers. I think there were more. David, you were more in the upper class.
Yeah, I wasn't there at that time, but I think there were quite a few more Levium than Kohanim.
Yeah, I mean, I consider that at the start you had, though there's different issues with ages, you started out with 5 Kohanim and 22,000 Levium. So,
No, but if historically, you have to go back to Ezra's time when there was a very small population of Levium because they didn't come back. But the
Kohanim had more incentive to come back for Bayis Sheni.
But now there's a population in both places, so there were plenty above. I think possibly, Rabbi, it could be the time lag because as everybody is reason makdimim with the truma to get rid of it quickly. It's a small amount, but the Trumas Maser wouldn't be delivered to a Kohen until somebody had given it to a Levi.
Right, so it's a later time.
There's a time lag there.
the timeline. Yeah.
If you assume they had the same requirement within so many days to do it, that wouldn't that would apply to both. If you have 30 days or whatever it is,
Well, but you know, you make a good point. In sheer numbers, there was less truma given than Maser, right? Because they had so many more Levium. So it's possible that the Levium were inundated with so much Maser because, right? I mean, that they may have had an oversight. Whereas giving to the Kayan right off the top was more straightforward. Once it went to the Levi and there were so many more of them, there was maybe a greater possibility of a glitch where inadvertently he didn't give Truma.
the higher population would say there's a higher probability of
Right.
having an error.
Right. I mean, look at the starting point of, because we have all this Trumas Meiser and all the other things and so on, but your starting point is nominally 2% of the crop Truma and 10% Meiser to the Levium. So if you have 5 times as many Levium, then it's pretty much a wash of how much Cohen gets and how much a Levi gets on average. If you have a lot more than 5 times as many Levium, they're not really getting as much. If you have a lot fewer than 5 times as many Levium, then it's the other way.
Yeah. We see it in Shul too. I know you give Elias Menashe, but I see it from different times that the paucity of Kohanim forces you to give the Levi that Aliyah.
But even then, again, depending on the minion, it varies a lot. I've had times where I have 3 or 4 Kohanim and no Levium. The Kohen gets whichever Kohen I pick gets 2 Aliyahs. There are other times where there are no Kohanim, but there are a whole bunch of Levium. So it varies.
Yeah. Well, clearly, I guess in this particular case, there was a greater concern that the Levi might inadvertently not give Truma for whatever reason. So therefore, they made this. And this is Rav Meir, who was saying that this siyag was made, kind of a siyag, but this inyan was made that you have to give a chomesh. So who is this Rav Meir and why is he saying it? So the Gemara says, now we're going to look. The Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, very interesting. Maybe get Medina Sayam. If someone was giving a get to his wife and they were not living in the same country, so Medina Sayam, he had to send a shaliach to go overseas. Now that can take some time. Now, and there is a halacha that the shaliach has to be present when the get is written. And when he presents the get, he says the Gemara, the son-in-law, he has to say, B'fonai nechta, b'fonai nechta. That's a requirement of the shaliach. So here, he saw it, he was there, but he goes, Al Medina Siyam, and he gives it to her, he forgot. He forgot the phrase, and he didn't say it to her. So now, okay, is that a big inyan? He forgot. He was there, but he forgot to say it. So look what the Gemara says. The Gemara then says, she then remarries. She has a child. Yotzi v'havlad mamzer. She'll go out of the marriage. She'll get remarried with a child, and the child will become a mamzer, as if there was no get. I mean, that's really very difficult. Divrei Rab Meir. These are the words of Rab Meir. So Rab Meir takes a very stringent position on what the Torah requires. So the Chachamim argue, and they say, no, the Vlad is not mamzer, is not a mamzer, even if he forgot to say it, but he was really there. So in other words, he didn't rely just on the husband, he was there, but he forgot to say it. So the forgetting to say it doesn't rise to the level of such a stringent situation. So Ketzad Yatza, so this is okay, I mean, what's the remedy? The remedy is, now, we're talking about in the same breath, okay? He forgot to say, and he gave it to her. So what's the remedy? Yitlo mimena, the shaliach should take the get back from the woman, and he should go back and give it to her before two witnesses. In other words, that's the remedy in the instant time. So he can now remedy the situation. God forbid he forgot, and later on he says, "Oh my gosh, I got to go back. I have to go back overseas or whatever," and she's already married. So in other words, there is a remedy, but it has to be pretty quick after the fact, where he made the mistake. But
Before she gets married. Is that before she gets remarried or after she gets remarried?
No. So no. The Gemara is telling us the remedy for the mistake is to redo it, but you can't redo it after she got married already.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, no. After she got married, it's
All right,
too late.
so question: when the shliach gives this to the woman, is there a requirement for Adam to see that he gave it to her and said
Yes,
everything?
of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
presumably it would be because he's not going to say, "Oops, I forgot to say it." Maybe he thinks maybe he did say it, and she's probably not going to say it. She wants to get married already. So it really becomes a question then would be perhaps of the Adam saying, maybe they just learned to realize, hey, this guy didn't say that.
Yeah, but now, so let me go back. You're right, but we have instances where even with Adim, with a number of people, there still is a faux pas, right? I mean, very simple. I mean, the requirement in the Torah of reading the Torah correctly, a mistake is made, and you have maybe 50 people there, and no one recognizes the mistake, right? And later on, someone says, "Wait a minute, I think I heard the wrong word, or the word was omitted, or whatever." And in a suffix, we go back. But that's why you have Adam, because Adam is supposed to be there as a backstop. And especially with something as sensitive as a get, which, like we see, opens the door to the possibility of a mamzer. I mean, that's almost the most extreme situation that can exist, right? Is that you forget to do all the words again. If let's say the get wasn't the kosher get, if the get wasn't the kosher get, no one saw it. No one saw the mistakes, and everything was made. And then we come back and say, "Wait a minute, this wasn't even a kosher get," and she got married. So, but the point here is that Rav Meir takes a very stringent position. So therefore, the raya is, in our case, he's also taking a stringent position. In other words, just like by get, look at the situation, so too by Trumas Maser, we want to say that Rav Meir says that we can't rely, and therefore in a Trumas Maser b'damai, you have to give. Okay, so that's the explanation. So now the Gemara is going to go a little bit further. With Rav Meir, now according to Rav Meir, mamzer. Are we going to penalize to such an extent? It's a kosher get. It's 100% kosher get. And he delivered it properly with all the bells and whistles. He forgot the magic words before nechtam. But we know he was there. I mean, we can ascertain that he was there. He just didn't say it at the time that he gave it to the woman. And in many cases, she won't know the halacha. I mean, and maybe the Adam were asleep at the time. But are we going to penalize such a serious penalty according to Rav Meir just because he didn't say? So the Gemara says in Rav Meir l'tamei that Rav Meir is consistent. He says, yes, you have to be stringent. Why? The Amar Rav Amnuna Rav Amnuna said in the name of Ula, Oima hoyer Rav Meir. He's quoting. He said Rav Meir would say, that anybody who you just go left or right from what the Chazal, what the Torah said is the proper way of giving a get. So he's what we would call a strict constructionist, and he said there is no leeway. If the requirement is and he didn't say it, even though he was there, those are the magic words, and you have to say the magic words, even to the point of Avlat Mamzer, which is really hair raising. That where makbid, even to the extent that you can passel a person for life. For mamzer is Nasiri. You're not talking about, a slight penalty where you have to pay some money or you get a slap on the wrist or whatever.
But the shliach, excuse me, Rabbi, the shliach is only one person. If he doesn't say the statement, it's not the same as if you had two witnesses with something severe.
Even though the witnesses saw that everything was done properly, but if they may have realized, or maybe he said it or they didn't think about it. In other words,
the fact that
even with the witnesses, there is a problem.
But the fact is that at the writing of the get, there were two witnesses. When it comes to giving it to her, there are two witnesses. Why do we put everything on a single witness when he forgot to say a couple of words?
Oh, because I think the idea is that you have a get, and you have it's sealed. Okay, this is the way that I mean, you're trusting him, but essentially it's almost like it sounds like it's taken almost like the level of the shvua, that this is how that it really is the same. It's the same document from end to end.
He doesn't have the same power as two Adam. He's a single aid. Now saying, and
he's not an aid. He's a shliach. He's a shliach.
He's not an aid.
But he's only
not
a single,
right.
He's a single person, and the fact that he didn't say why do we believe him when he says in front of me it was written? We believe him as one aid. Why do we make him into parcel the whole get that was given?
So again, so Reb Meir is saying that if the Torah, everything was done properly when he wrote the get, we're not even questioning that. But if the Torah is telling us that when a shliach goes to the wife, now the ex-wife, and he gives her the get, why is it required even? I mean, if everything was done properly, why is it required? So the Torah says, because even though we require two witnesses and not on one witness, he's not coming as a witness because the witnesses are signed on the document, no question. But since she is getting it and she has no recourse to talk to the husband or to go to the husband, there was no telephone, whatever. So he has an important function to link the husband to the wife. And the Torah is telling us that link is these words, and without saying it, he's breaking the chain of authenticity of this get. My question would be even different. We want to bring a raya to Maser, which is very important, obviously Minat Torah, and we bring a raya from Reb Meir from Gittin. But you're bringing a raya from the most extreme situation possible.
Right.
Because Gittin we're so makbid on Gittin not to create a mamzer, that's got to be up there as the most severe situation possible. And we're making a comparison between Gittin and Maser, not to take away from Maser, chas v'shalom, that Maser isn't important, but there's no kares. I mean, the ramifications are a carbon. You get mechila. A carbon mechila gives you redemption. You want to compare that to the case of an eshes ish, of a married woman who goes to marry with the full intent of saying, I was divorced, I accepted everything good, and again, she may not even be knowledgeable, and because it fell through the cracks. Says Reb Meir that he's a strict constructionist. The Torah, I go by the words of the Torah. I don't see where there's leeway. And therefore, I'm saying that you have to, the lot is a mamzer. And from that, we're extrapolating that Reb Meir is the Manda Omer of our Mishnah, who says that in the case of Maser Sheni, with the Mai, you have to give it. Somehow that doesn't balance on the scale. One is much more heavy, than the other. So it requires a little bit more thinking about how you make that comparison from something, even though with the Raisa, we say everything. Look, we know that a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and avera is an avera, and we don't weigh, like we said last week in the Torah by Shluach HaKain, that even though it's a quote easy mitzvah, we don't know what it means, but we're saying it's an easier mitzvah to accomplish, and you do it. Therefore, you'll be trained to do a mitzvah to do a mitzvah chamura. Okay, fine. There's an analysis there that the Torah it's a training point. But by avera, do we say that every avera is equal? I mean, we see in many cases that certain averas, certainly averas that have been odom l'makar, don't have that same severity. So it's a little bit difficult to understand what Reb Meir's position is, and they're saying because Reb Meir says it by Gittin, therefore it's the same by Masa Sheni.
So but the point of the Chachamim, I believe, in differing with Rabbi Meir, is that this is the exclamation of before Nichtam is a Derabanan, and they don't want to be as severe as he wants to be. He's saying it's a Derabanan, so the rabbis made a fence around it.
Right.
And the Chachamim are disagreeing. It's a Derabanan to make that statement.
That's right.
You can't fool around with the signatures on the get, or the fact that this was done before two witnesses, this is done before two witnesses. That's deraisa. But the explanation of before nichtam is a derabanan, and the Chachamim are not being as severe as Rabbi Meir.
Right. So Rabbi Meir is taking the Rabbanan to the next level, and he's saying that what you say has the same severity as the underlying Torah requirement, and that's a little bit, again, it is Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir was the Tanna Kama of the Mishnah, so we can't. But you realize that even in that context, what we say is that since the Chachamim were the Rabbin, Rabbi Meir was the Yochid, that generally speaking, the halacha is like the Chachamim, not like Rabbi Meir. So we see that even in this, it's a discussion for purposes of what we call the Talmudic exegesis, where we're going back and forth. La halacha, this wouldn't be the case. So at least from that standpoint, we're not as stringent as it would seem. But Rabbi Meir himself takes it to that degree, and again, Rabbi Meir was no lightweight, so we have to at least consider his words, even if it isn't the final saying. But the point here is that the whole reason why the Mishnah is saying that this is the case is because of Rabbi Meir, and therefore we have to at least consider his view, and we're saying that he is. He's the person who we go by. So but again, it's a little, even Reb Meir, if you want to understand Reb Meir's svara, I mean, he just says it's doctrine. So it's hard just to understand. I mean, that's his view. He's a strict constructionist. You can't get out of the view. But the Chachamim's view, which is the prevailing view, I think that takes into account the fact that look, even by Gittin, they say it's not a mamzer, right? It's not to say that they would say that he is a mamzer, but you can't compare it to Masa Sheni. They're saying underlying that it doesn't lead to mamzeres. So in any event, it's a little bit hard to understand Reb Meir's view, and we should we'll have to see and whether or not. All right, so let's look at Rashi. So Rashi says, Kasha le Rav Elazar. Mr. Senior Isaac Kasha Rav Elazar ben Pedas. Also Chachamim Chizuk lahosif al trumas maser shel demai chomesh sheni frasha element devreya. Right. So it's only midrabanan. So they added the chomesh. Maybe get from B'dina Sayam leisha she'osu bala shaliach lalicha legaresh hitzvichu lomer b'fonai nechtam v'chad nechtam. You have to say, Ve'ein edim mitsuyin l'kaimod. So Rashi adds something very interesting that to your point, Menashe, ve'ein edim mitsuyin l'kaimod. There were no edim. I mean, typically you would have edim there, but the ein edim mitsuyin l'kaimod. There are no edim available to actually sort of certify. So then the question is, how do you know that he didn't say? So you can only rely, because the wife won't know. She let's say, I mean, she won't know the halacha, but the shaliach should be someone who is, a ben Torah. He's
Whether or not he's a ben Torah generally knows everything, he should have been told when they gave him this task. They should have said, okay, you're going to take this, you're always going to keep this in your bag and in sight, and when you get there, you're going to do A, B, C.
Right. So if Adam weren't available and he knows better, but he forgot in the flurry of everything, he gave her the get to say, here's your get, and that was it. So so when the Gemara says that what the remedy is, he should go back and take it back from her, he remembered. He said, oh my goodness, I gave her this get. I didn't say look what the repercussions might be. So he goes back. And again, this goes to the point that maybe if there were Adam, it wouldn't happen because the Adam would be there. But Rashi makes the point and says that this arises because Adam Mitsuim L'Kaimah. In other words, if the Adam had been there, it wouldn't have been a problem.
But he also, I mean,
I can't say that with certainty because maybe the Adam would have overlooked it anyway. But we're saying it's an extra pair of eyes, it wouldn't have happened.
I'm saying that when they're writing a get,
Right.
and he gets the instructions with the get, they should also be having a piece of paper or parchment together with the get rolled up that piece of parchment says you have to say these words. I mean, it's so easy to avoid this problem.
Jay, that would be an easy solution that you have it all in writing and he has to follow the instruction. But Mastama, they didn't have that. They relied on the shaliach that he would say it.
But they had to give instructions of how to go, where to go, address.
No. They gave, but it was all Baal Peh. It was all oral. You're right. If it was all in writing and he had the writing with him, it was rolled up together with the get, and he looks at his instruction sheet. You get an instruction sheet for everything that we do, and the instruction sheet says, do this, do this, do this.
But he needed instructions
he should have known.
to go. But he needed instructions more than Baal Peh to get to the city, the right block, and the right address.
But apparently he didn't. You're right, and he didn't get it. So it was an oversight. Again, the point we're trying to make is whether there was a writing or not a writing. Maybe there was and he lost it. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is that the shaliach has a responsibility, and he failed in his responsibility. Now, if the Edom are there and they also overlook, chaval, because then we're in bad shape. But Rashi wants to make the point that if the Edom had been there, it would have been different. So he says the ein edim mitzuin l'kaim. All right, but the truth of the matter is, if there were edim and there was an oversight, he'd still be a mamzer. In other words, it doesn't change the outcome as long as the shliach didn't say the magic words. So we see how important that is. Yotzi mi shenosa al yadei get zeh. The word yotzi means that she goes out because she's now she's now no longer a married woman, so she can remarry. So that's what Rashi is saying. So, and anyway, so we see from here that basically we've answered the kasha, and we hung our hat on Reb Meir, who is a very, even though the halacha may not be like him, because the chachamim are the majority. But nevertheless, Reb Meir takes that position. So the Gemara wants to impart to us that how serious this offense is, and since he is lishitaso, even though in our minds get is not the same as Trumas Maser. I mean, they're both mitzvahs that you have to perform, but the penalty for get is so much more serious than Trumas Maser that one might argue get is get, we understand, but how do you draw the parallel to Trumas Maser? So the Gemara tells us no, that Rameir, even though he doesn't weigh the mitzvahs. He doesn't say get as it's a mitzvah to give a get, and it's also a mitzvah to give Trumas Maser. So he says a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and like we saw in the parsha last week, we don't necessarily weigh the mitzvahs, even though one might be an easier mitzvah to accomplish than the other. They bear the same weight, and therefore he says with Trumas Maser, even though the solution is a simple one, there's no repercussion in Trumas Maser. All you have to do is you have to give it. Nevertheless, you're required, and you have to give the chomesh. So anyway, so we'll stop here. The Gemara then goes on further next week, which is them. But again, conceptually, we're now getting into the whole Indian of chomesh, and especially here, we're going to go on to some of the other categories. But in this category, this was the sort of the main issue that we had on Trumas Maser.
Shkoyach.
All right.